Hello, everyone. Raymond Moore, Kilted Prepper. How's everybody doing this evening? Running a smidge late. Had to go to a wedding reception. Was rather fun. It was one of my friends, and he actually got married over in Scotland. And so a bunch of us were wearing kilts. So, of course, I had to show up and things. But ah, catching my breath here. Miss Cynthia is not joining us tonight. She has got a massive migraine in her left eye, and she was actually wearing sunglasses today. And so I actually sent her back to bed and said, you know what, I got this. Don't worry about it. But her head is throbbing. These happen about maybe every 2 months, 3 months or something where she gets one where she has to wear her sunglasses and everything like that. But yeah, she's not doing good tonight, and just told her to skip it, and I'll handle it. So lots of things going on in the world here. Got 3 people in the room. Do me a favor, can you hear me? Let me know, and that way I'll know if you guys hear me or not. So I know I got my little button pushed here and things. So Karen, hey, how you doing, Karen? But tonight, what I wanted to talk to you about are actually global events that are going to affect us here in the United States in the coming near future, as well as the uh, kind of distant future. I'm kind of looking about 3 years ahead, and so I'm seeing some global situations taking place that are not too good. So hey, Jock, how you doing, man? And good, thank you, Karen. Thank you for letting me know. So, but a lot of interesting things taking place in the world today, and probably the most recent one that you guys may have heard about is the Kherson Dam. And so I'm not sure, this is by the city of Kherson in the Ukraine region. And what happened was that they believe that the dam was blown up. Now, I think the Russians are taking credit for it. I'm not sure if anybody is, but this really has to be an inside job, meaning who controlled the dam, which is Russia. Russia controlled the dam, and where this explosion took place was actually in the generator room. Now, this dam is a massively concrete fortified structure, and so we're talking about a couple thousand feet thick of reinforced concrete. And so uh, there were no bombs, being flown, or no, flights or anything. So that knocks that one out. Some missiles did happen to hit them probably about, I think, 6 or 8 months ago. And again, they're not going to have that much effect on something that is reinforced concrete. And so again, at the smallest point, which was at the very top, I believe that was 300 feet thick of reinforced concrete, and then at the base was an easy 2,000 to 2,500 feet of reinforced concrete. So we're talking about something very substantial here. And then also the sluice gates, or the control towers, where it would probably be the easiest to knock out and cause flooding, were not the areas that blew out. What happened was it was the generator room. And so it's very speculated that Russia actually blew this up themselves, and it probably take a couple freight cars full of explosives to actually do the damage of where the explosion took place. And again, it let's see here, you can see, it took right place in the middle of the dam. And so it would take quite a bit of explosives to actually create that sort of hole in the dam. And so that was an interesting situation. But so why is it interesting? One, we have a nuclear reactor further up the river, or up the reservoir, and right now they say they've got about 2 months worth of water, so they're doing pretty decent, and everything in reserve and stuff. But the biggest thing here, and let's see if I can add this, is there is a canal. And if you see this blue area and that blue dotted line and that green arrow, right there is a canal. And this feeds the oh god, not Kherson, the Crimea Peninsula, or the Crimea whole area there. And so this canal was also affected. So if there's no water coming down the river, then there's no water going into this canal, and which means the entire area of oh gosh, I just said it, Kherson, Crimea. The Crimea area is basically going to be turned into a desert. And so this is and this is important to understand, because the Crimea region, their primary exports are agriculture and livestock, and then also steel and some other things. But by them destroying the dam, what they have basically done is also destroyed food production. Now, the Kherson area um, is one of the primary producers of feed or grain for, the Russian, Federation. And so it's a I don't understand why they blew this up, because basically what they're doing is hurting themselves, and it will cause definite famine in that area because they don't have water. And so the big key issue that I want you guys to kind of remember here is food production. And so with the food production, it's going to get stymied quite a bit. And in fact, I think I've shown you this slide before. But if you would take Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, and you lump them all together, say into one conglomerate, the first column is what they are number one producers are in the world. And then the second column is what they are as the second producers of the world. And the third column is the third producers of the world. And as you can see, wheat is one of the primary things that Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine produce for the world. And so if they took out the whole Crimea area, and the Crimea area is no longer producing food, then that is going to cause some major shortages. And so we know that there's grain issues. There's some sort of UN treaty or something like that I think is going to be ending here in July. And their odds are pretty good that Russia is not going to agree to this treaty again, because what it is, about every 90 days they've come together and say, hey, let's let Ukraine ship this grain out for the rest of the world because the world is hungry. And so Russia's been playing along saying, yeah, let's do it. But odds are very good that Russia is, when it comes back up for renewal in July, that they will probably say no. And again, by destroying the Crimean area too, and that food production and stuff, there's a lot of problems with a lot of that food issue. Now, here's an interesting map here, and take some time here. If you look at the US, Russia, Brazil, Australia, these are the primary food producers globally. And what they do is they export 35% or more of their output to the rest of the world. Anything in red, orange, or yellow, or that goldenrod sort of color, are people who import. Now, the ones that are in red means that they import 75% of their food. Now, if you look over to Mongolia and China, Mongolia imports 50 to 75% of their food. China, and this is rather surprising, what a lot of people don't understand, China imports a lot of their food, from 10 to 24%. They actually are not growing enough food to feed their people. And so we're seeing a lot of things take place in this. And here's another one. Now, this is rather interesting with everything going on. And we're looking at these, four major food producers here. So US, Brazil, Australia, and Russia. And so if anything is being stymied or cut off or something like that, then these are the nations that are going to be affected. Anything with an X on it is going to have some issues in regards to gaining food. And anything in red actually is probably going to be looking at famine. And so we're going to be looking at famines in northern Africa, Central Asia, Mongolia, parts of South America, and also Central America. So a lot of these countries are not doing good. Now, you'll notice two countries here that do not have X's on them: Australia and the US. Now, Brazil, Russia, Australia, and the US are pretty much food independent, meaning that they can create the resources, so they have the fuel, they have the seed, they're able to produce fertilizer, and then they're able to produce food. Now, again, a lot of other nations can't because, they need those imports. They need that fertilizer. They need that seed. They need that fuel and everything. And if global supply stops, then all of a sudden they're not eating. And so by looking at these things, and again looking at this chart here again, the primary thing that Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine export, and they're the number one exporters, is fertilizer and potash in the first column. Now, potash is what is needed for fertilizer as well as fertilizer itself. And so we're in a good position here in the United States because, again, we produce our own fertilizer, we produce our own seed, we have our own fuel, we have the means to basically self sustain and feed our nation. So, in fact, let's just check this out here. Fertilizer sourcing, that's now a couple of years ago, pretty much still hangs for today. And so we can see that we import only 12% of our nitrogen. We only import 9% of our phosphate, but we import 93% of our potash, but we import it from Canada. And Canada is our number two trade partner. Our number one trade partner, believe it or not, is Mexico. And again, this is due to the trade bill, or the trade agreement that Trump actually put in place. And so our strongest trade partners are, Mexico and Canada. And so we get a lot of our potash from Canada. So we're still sitting in a very, very good position. A lot of our Canada and US does a lot of trade together and everything. So do we have a potash problem? No, not at all. There we get it from Canada. So no biggie. Whereas if you looked at Brazil, Brazil imports 95% of their nitrogen, 75% of their phosphate, and 91% of their potash. And if you can see here, 21% of their nitrogen comes from Russia. 20% comes from China. 15% of their phosphate comes from Russia. Let's see here, potash. 26% of their potash comes from Russia, and then also 18% comes from Belarus. Australia, same situation. 68% of their nitrogen is imported, only 7% coming from Russia. Their phosphate is 50% imported from China. And then again, their potash, they're getting 3% from Belarus, but 70% of their potash is imported. And so when we're looking at these countries, and we're not counting Russia in this mix because Russia's at war right now, they are not producing food, they're not doing anything, Ukraine's not doing anything, Belarus is not doing anything. And so again, a lot of the countries are going to be affected because Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus are at, this whole big global conflict, or this conflict over there in Europe. And the outcome is all these nations with a black X are going to start suffering in one way or another. Now you say, well, Russia's up there and they're, But yeah, Russia is not planting fields right now. Why? Because they're pulling all their guys off and turning them into soldiers and sending to the war. They just got done sending 500,000 troops, or they're getting ready to send about 500,000 troops to the front lines of Ukraine. And so that means a lot of these guys are not, on the farm. And so farm production has slowed down quite a bit in these areas. And then also potash and fertilizer production has pretty much almost grinded to a halt due to either sanctions or factories being destroyed. Because again, in Ukraine produced a lot of the needed materials for fertilizer and so forth. And since they're not producing, and Russia's not producing, and Belarus is not producing, no fertilizer. No fertilizer means no food. And again, these are the nations that need fertilizer. And if there's no fertilizer, no matter what, they're not going to be planting crops. And if they do plant crops, they have a very, very poor yield. And so, what we're looking at globally, and I hate saying this, is we are looking at a global famine due to this war that's taking place in the middle of Europe. And so you're saying, well, why is this going to affect us? How is this going to affect us? Now, again, since we are the one of the largest countries, us, Australia, and Brazil, well, Brazil's having some issues right now. In fact, they're getting ready to run out of fertilizer. And so because they're getting ready to run out, their production levels are going to start dropping. That leaves Australia, and that leaves the United States and Canada. And so what is going to happen when all these nations start come knocking on our door? They're going to need fertilizer, they're going to need seed, they're going to need fuel, and they're going to be needing food, period. So if we're the ones that we're producing, because we are able to be self-sustaining and self-sustaining at a rather good level, when all these nations start coming to our front doorstep asking for these things, what do you think is going to happen? What's going to happen is prices are going to go up drastically, because basically, like it or not, it's capitalism at its best. So we're going to start seeing higher prices for everything, because the country with the biggest wallet is going to be buying the things that they need for their country. And so, our some of the stuff we'll be able to maintain and everything like that, but we're going to probably be exporting even more, because people are going to be wanting to get higher prices. And with countries coming in saying that, hey, man, I'll pay you, if the going price is $2 and they're willing to pay $20 a pound for whatever, guess who's going to get the fertilizer or the seed or whatever? The person with the biggest, wallet is going to win. And so that in of itself then is going to start causing shortages here in the US. And so I've been kind of warning for a while that we are going to start seeing seed shortages. We're going to start seeing fertilizer shortages. We're, due to certain administrative policies and everything, we're having diesel shortages and fuel shortages and everything, even though we are literally standing on tons of fuel and natural gas right underneath our feet. But because of stupid green deals and everything like that, those things are not coming out of the ground for whatever reason. And so, we are going to start, feeling the effects here probably pretty soon. And if not starting to feel, in fact, I know we're feeling the effects already, because I've been talking to some farmers and ranchers and things, and they're paying double, if not triple, for seed and fertilizer already. And so what's going to happen next spring when things are really at a cusp? And so it's going to get really ugly out there, and like it or not, millions of people are probably going to die of starvation. And so we're looking at that. And again, biggest thing that you can start doing right now is really securing some of these things. Start learning how to make your own fertilizer. What we do is we have worm bins. And so, excuse me, we have worm bins, and so I'm constantly collecting what I call worm pee and or worm poo, aka worm castings, and I use that as my fertilizer. Worm fertilizer is the greatest thing in the world. It's easy to make some of these bins. All you do is you go down to your local big box store and get two big bins. And you're going to need two big bins, a couple bricks, and a drill. So you drill a bunch of itty bitty small holes in one bin, and then some bigger holes on the top for breathing and everything. That's where you're going to dump your dirt and your worms. And then you put bricks down in the bottom bin and then place this top bin into it so that it can drip through. And so you're going to have a rather good collection system with your worm pee and everything. And then what I do also is I'll usually water my worms about every 10 days with about a half gallon of water. Or if it's raining, I just let the rain do it. And we have so many worms, so much dirt in our worm bins that it almost, kind of acts as a percolator in a sense. And so all that worm castings, all that worm pee and everything is filtering through and dripping out through the bottom. And currently right now, I probably have about 6 gallons of really great, worm fertilizer. And what you do is about a quarter, a couple cups of that to a gallon of water, and you've got some good fertilizer. And so and then also, I don't know about you, but it's wise to fertilize about every 10 days or so, or every 2 weeks. But that's what we use, or I use some sort of other organic fertilizer. But other things that you can do is if you go fishing, save your fish carcasses and so forth, and stick them in a bin, throw that into a little bit with some water, not much, and start creating some fish emulsion. And then what you do is once the fish starts rotting and everything, you want to have a really good cap on that too, because it's going to get really stinky, really ugly. But when that starts breaking down, then what you can do is put one of these paint stirrers and on your drill, stick it down in there and kind of turn it into an emulsion. And you're going to have a really, really good fish emulsion fertilizer. It will stink to high heaven, folks. I kid you not. You'll probably start gagging, but you'll have some great fertilizer. And then just let it sit for a couple months, in the sun and everything. Keep adding some water to it, keep adding some fish to it, and so forth. And you'll get some really, really good fish emulsion. And then again, what you do is fill it up with water and stir it up and everything. And then again, use about 2 cups of that to 1 gallon of water to fertilize your plants. So those are a couple ways to fertilize your plants. Another way too is save your pee. And I've seen several videos of people out there actually now saving their urine and using that as a fertilizer. And so it's got a good a good nitrogen, phosphate. Gosh, what is the formula? But it's actually a pretty decent fertilizer. Kind of stinky, but again, these are ways of naturally to create fertilizer and things. But we're going to start seeing shortages here, and it's going to get really, really ugly, and things are going to get rather difficult for the world as a whole. But again, because we are self-sufficient and we grow a lot, we do a lot and everything, God has been good to us as a nation, then a lot of the nations are going to be coming to us. Again, look at all these X's. All these countries are going to be knocking on either our front door or Australia's front door, looking for seed, fertilizer, or just food, out and out food. So that's a lot of countries. That's a lot of people, folks. I mean, that is a boatload of people that are going to be hungry. And it's probably going to get to a point where we're not going to be able to export anymore because we're not going to be able to feed our own people. And so, or fertilize or have seed or so forth. But we'll see what's going to happen. But this is definitely going to affect us. And how it's going to affect us is by higher prices. And you think that you're paying high prices now? high I mean, the prices are going to get even more insane, folks. And so this is why it's super important to grow a garden, start getting to know your local farmers and so forth, and start shopping local, start finding where your local farmers markets are, start getting maybe into a garden co-op where all these local neighborhood gardeners come together and barter and trade. So if you got excess zucchini and they have excess tomatoes, do some trade with each other and doing that. A really good app to do something that is called Nextdoor. Now, I know some of you have heard about this, but Nextdoor is a great way of getting in contact in your local community. And I belong to a couple gardening groups that are local here in the Salem Roanoke area. And something that I'm looking at is once I start producing and maybe start having excess that after I've done canning, dehydrating, and all that other stuff, what can I use for barter and trade? And so that's a great website to get on and start looking at. Another thing is, looking for gardening tools and other things like that. Facebook Marketplace is the place to go. In fact, we were just looking at a compost tumbler, and we're kind of on search for that. And by going on Facebook Marketplace, you can get some really, really good deals and finding some really good stuff. And so one of the things I'm looking at with that compost tumbler is that it speeds up the process of the compost process. And so you're able to get compost in just a couple weeks, versus letting it just sit and you got to turn it and all that other junk. With a compost tumbler, you're able to speed that process up, even add some organic enzymes that will help break everything down and everything, and give you some really good healthy compost, which will again feed your plants and help fertilize and so forth. But these are some of the things of what we're doing and with what we're seeing and things. Now, if you joined me a couple weeks ago, we talked about the chip crisis. And again, going back to what's happening here in Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, you look in the first column, neon. And neon is a critical component to making microchips. And the reason is they use neon to focus in the lasers that do the etching on the chips. Well, there is zero neon coming out of Russia and Ukraine. And what was happening is that Russia was capturing the gases because of all the steel mills they have. And so in the steel mills, they use oxygen and nitrogen, oxygen and nitrogen, and to make steel. And then capturing all the other gases, putting them in tanks, and then shipping them over to Ukraine, where then they were separated. And one of the key elements that was separated was neon. And this took place in a city called Mariupol. Now, Mariupol in Ukraine is no longer even in existence. It's just a bombed out flat area. And so with the steel mills basically shut down, not being run due to sanctions and also being blown up, and then also Mariupol being, a graveyard and nothing's coming out of Mariupol, neon is not being produced at all. And so again, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus are the number one providers of neon globally. And so now the 30% also is, who produces neon is China. Well, China's holding on to their neon because they make microchips as well. They don't make the microchips that, a lot of, they make the microchips that, when your margarita machine goes off and is ready to, drink your margaritas, it plays like cucaracha or something like that, or some of these smaller, smart pin, microchips, or some of these other devices. China is not technically advanced as Taiwan, Japan, US, and South Korea. And so the chips that are going to be affected are the medium to high grade chips. And if there's no neon, then that means that there's going to be no microchips. And so it's a serious situation that's taking place. And so, we are seeing a global shortage of microchips. And again, here, this is from Scientific American. A global computer chip shortage shows danger of U.S. production trends. Basically, what they're showing is that, trends are showing going down. And so if you want that new iPhone 14, then you better get it, or that new Samsung 23, you better get it, because what's going to happen is prices are going to start going up. These phone prices are going to start to skyrocket, as if they're not already. But any of your smartphone devices, your computers, other things like that that need high-end computing, that use some of these high-end chips and everything, then they're just not going to be available. And so that's another thing that is going to affect us. Now, something else here that I want to point out. So not only is there neon, but palladium. And so palladium, rhodium, and platinum are also in shortage. Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia are the number 2 providers of the palladium groups. And then also refined copper. You need copper as well to make microchips. And so we're seeing 3 critical components here for microchips that are no longer being supplied because of the situation that's going on in Europe right now. And so this is, again, what is causing these global shortages. And we're going to start feeling, probably, I mean, people are it's interesting. I am not seeing as many Apple or Samsung commercials. And in fact, I was watching one of the AT&T commercials, with that lady and that cute little girl who does, the AT&T commercials and everything. I found it interesting that they're pushing the Google phones right now. And, well, why are they pushing the Google phones? And my thoughts is they're pushing the Google phones because they're running out of iPhones and Samsungs. And so they need to keep business and doors open and everything. So start pushing the Google phones. And so I thought that was rather interesting. Where normally they've always been pushing the newest and latest iPhone or the newest and latest Samsung and everything. But here now they're pushing Google phones. So let's see here. Who do we got? We got Karen in the room. We got Jock in the room. We got Thomas in the room. We got Heather in the room. But it's interesting that all this stuff is going on. And so these are things that are going to definitely affect us because of the war that is taking place in Europe. And so, and then to top all that off, another thing that is really hitting us, and I just want to thank you for watching right now, and make sure you like, subscribe, share, and ring that little bell so that you get notified whenever we put a new video or go live and everything. So do me a favor right now, hit that thumbs and give me a thumbs up right here at this moment. But something that is going to be trickling our way in the very near future is, again, bricks. And if you're in my Telegram group, and I want to encourage you to join my Telegram group, my Telegram link is right there below in the description. Join my Telegram group because I'm really following and sending out news in my Telegram group about all the things that are taking place with bricks and stuff. And so it's going to get really hairy, really interesting. And it's something I liked about this slide is that if accepted, the new proposed BRIC members would create an entity with a GDP 30% larger than the United States, over 50% of the global population, and in control of 60% of the global gas or oil preserves. And so it's something that's very, very concerning to me, because a lot of the nations, if you look at a lot of the nations that are wanting to join BRICS, they are either neutral with us, kind of don't like us, or out and out hate us. And one of the countries that is joining is Saudi Arabia. And our current administration and Saudi Arabia are not friends. And so we've been really, doing some not so cool things with Saudi Arabia, and then also some of the other nations as well. But Saudi Arabia is really leading a charge. Brazil is leading a charge like crazy. And so um, they are just out and out calling for a de-dollarization. Saudi Arabia has been doing some soft shouting of de-dollarization. Iran is going to be joining the BRICS, and they out and out hate us. And so they're all about de-dollarization. And so a lot of these countries, when they come together, and it looks like they are going to be creating a new BRICS currency, which is going to be called the R2. Um, it's interesting that they're calling it R2. I bet you the default name is just going to be called the brick, but they're calling it R2. And but when the R2 comes out, I see us being pushed into corners, or pushed out of deals, or charged higher prices in trade and everything. And because they're going to basically force, the US to use the R2 or the brick to do transactions in, and basically also circumvent which is called the SWIFT system. SWIFT is how nations, countries, and so forth send money to each other, is using the SWIFT system. And since we control that, we're able to lock down countries and everything. And what's been happening is, because we've been sanctioning the crap out of Russia, um, Russia's finding workarounds by going to other countries. So, for example, Russia's been selling a lot of their oil to India, and then India is selling that oil to the world. And so, are the sanctions, they're finding ways to get around the sanctions. And so, by having BRICS on board, they can totally circumvent the entire SWIFT system, not even care about sanctions and everything. I mean, we can throw sanctions on them all day long, but they're going to be trading and using the brick or the R2. And so, but interesting things going on, folks. I mean, it was really interesting seeing this dam blow up, because this is something that I've been watching, and kind of, knowing that canal that feeds the Crimean area. And since Crimea also feeds a good portion of Russia, it's where they get a lot of their food and everything from. And this is why I thought it was rather strange that Russia would blow this up. And again, they're the only ones that could do it. I mean, even if we sent covert ops in and stuff, there's no way we could have gotten like 2 truckloads of explosives in the generator room to blow that up. And so the only one who truly had access to that area was Russia. Ukraine couldn't have done it. They couldn't have done a covert op. NATO or us or whoever couldn't do a covert op and get that much explosives in or anything like that. And so the only logical explanation is that Russia blew up that dam. And so not only did they do that and cause that nuclear power plant to be endangered, but because of the flooding and everything, I mean, you can Google Maps now and see how many people have been displaced and how many towns and cities and everything been flooded. And then, but they shot themselves in the foot. And now that canal that feeds the Crimean area is no longer, feeding water to the Crimean area, which they need. Everything down there is irrigated. They don't have any water. So everything is irrigated. If they have no canal, they have no water, thus no irrigation, thus no crops, no agriculture, no farming, no nothing. And since their two primary exports are agriculture and livestock, guess what ain't being produced anymore this year? So this is again at the beginning of the year. Everything is going into the fields and everything right now. Seeds going into the ground. Well, they don't have water now. And so hush up, Daff, my little Daff. But so we're seeing that, but this is just going to put a further strain on the food supply chain globally. And we thought things were bad already. It's going to get a whole lot worse, to the point where I think that we're going to see some problems also with famine and everything taking place in Russia as well, since the Crimean area is one of their bread baskets. And so, and in fact, I can just see a lot of people in the Crimean area just basically packing up and leaving, because the Crimean area in probably 3 to 6 months is just going to turn into a desert. And so, since they relied so much on that irrigation and that water and everything, they have enough water to drink. Russia was going crazy at filling all the reservoirs and everything from the canal, but all they have is enough water to drink. They do not have enough water to irrigate or anything like that. And so, again, that's going to put a serious bind on the people in Crimea. But I think it's going to also put a serious bind on some of the people in Russia, because they depended so much on that area for their food. And so, not only is Russia going to suffer, and this is one of the reasons why Russia has some X's on it, is because some of their food and everything that they were importing comes from the Crimean region. And so they're going to be suffering in that aspect as well. And so it's going to be really, really interesting to see what's going to happen. And the thing is that these are things that are not going to just resolve themselves in months. For example, to bring a potash fertilizer production plant online takes a minimum of 3 years. And then it takes like that about 3 years to create the potash. So we're looking about actually 3 to 5 years for potash production to start ramping up in some of these other countries and everything. Now, again, here in the U.S., we get our potash from Canada. Canada is secure. Canada is our number 2 trade partner. And so we have no problems with attaining potash and everything. And then, since we have such an abundance of natural gas, to the point where we're seeing it as a waste deposit or a waste waste item, they're burning it off in all these refineries and everything like that. Because we got tons of it, and so it's a waste product. But we use natural gas to create nitrogen fertilizer, and so again, we don't have any problem with creating or producing fertilizer. We are rich in croplands and everything, so we have no problem producing seed. And then again, because we're sitting on a boatload of oil and we're sitting on a boatload of natural gas, we have no problem with energy. And it's the current administration that's causing the problem. But as time ticks on, I really see trends turning around, and basically the administration being forced to start drilling again and start opening up some of these wells, start opening up some of these natural gas lines, and start doing stuff like that just for the sake of our nation. Now, again, sometimes they haven't really cared about our nation, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with the new election. And I really enjoyed when one lady was asking Trump on the CNN interview, what about this? What's one of the first things you're going to do when you get in office? He goes, drill, baby, drill. So I hope that's true, because we were energy independent and we can be energy independent again. And so, again, we're sitting in a very good position. My concern, and when I look at all these X's and stuff like that, is these represent millions upon millions of people who are going to be starving. either because they can't put crops in the ground or they can't get seed, they can't get fertilizer. No matter what, they're not going to be able to get food or grow their own food because they're so globally dependent on their imports. And these imports are drying up and they are not going to be replaced in any time soon. So these countries are going to be suffering, and so since they are going to be suffering, they're going to be needing food and everything. They're going to be knocking on our door and Australia's door, and I really feel that because Australia is so isolated as kind of a nation of their own, and down there, that a lot of the world is going to be showing up to our front doorstep. And so, again, this is going to cause the prices of everything to go up quite a bit because farmers and ags and companies and everything, they're going to be selling to the highest price. It's going to be a great time to be making money. And, the sad thing is that a lot of people here in the U.S. are going to suffer because they're not going to be able to, pay, these higher prices and everything. I was just in a grocery store, and I think I told you about this before. I was in a grocery store, and there was this elderly lady ahead of me, and she was trying to use her card to pay for groceries, and it just wasn't working. It was constantly being declined, and she was just in tears. And she just had some basic necessities and things. And so finally, I just, say, hey, ma'am, don't worry about it. I get you. I'll help you here. And I just told the lady to put it on my tab. But we're going to start seeing a lot more of that. I mean, we're going to start seeing a lot more people who just basically are going to be, do I pay the heating bill or do I eat? Or do I pay my pharmacy bill or do I eat? Or do I pay the rent or mortgage or do I eat? And that's what I think is coming down the pipe here. And so this is why I'm encouraging people like crazy to start creating their own personal supply chains right now so that you've got these things in hand, what you're doing with them, they're in place, they are habit now versus waiting down the road and I'll do it when it's more troublesome. No, you need to be doing these things now. You need to be growing a garden now. You need to be reaching out to local farmers and ranchers now. You need to be looking up the local farmers markets now, and you need to start doing business with American companies now. And another app that I talked about in last show was called Public Square. Public Square is a great app, and you can download it on your phone, get it up on your desktop and tablet and everything. But what Public Square is, you type in your zip code, and it shows all these family-owned, locally owned businesses. And this is something that Cynthia and I are now doing is when we're needing something, we're looking on Public Square first to see what companies are out there that we can support and help them. And so that's another really, really great resource, not only with Nextdoor, but Public Square is also a great resource. I really encourage you to do that. But another thing that's got me greatly concerned is a war in China. And I posted a video here, and let me see if I can bring this up. So your computer. There was a video that if you were in my Telegram group, I shared with you, and I really encouraged you to watch. But this is, and I've got the link down below in the description. But what would happen if China and the U.S. went to war hour by hour? And so this is a breakdown, hour by hour. And basically, no matter what, they are saying that China is going to attack first. Now, everybody instantly goes to nukes. There's not going to be a nuclear exchange because if anything happens, they want Taiwan. They want the technology. They want everything that's going to go on there and everything. And so that's going to be the big push. Now, if they just go in with nukes and everything, they're going to nuke everything up there. And so the war is, they basically now just have a plot of ground. And so are nukes going to be involved in this? No, not at all. And I really highly encourage you to watch this movie or this video. It's about 20 minutes long, but a very, very good blow by blow what's going to happen if China and US get into it. And so, but it's going to be a very interesting situation. But I say all that because anything Chinese made or Chinese sourced is going to dry up overnight. And if China doesn't cut us off first, or we don't put more sanctions on China first, excuse me, allergies, um, we're going to see more and more Chinese goods disappearing off the shelf. And folks, I mean, I don't think you realize how much either of stuff that you buy is Chinese made or Chinese sourced. You know, you may say, "Oh, I buy American all the time. I buy Crest, and I buy, Johnson and Johnson, and I buy this." And I, these are all companies that get their resources not, if not by China, then they're sourced also by BRIC countries. Now, BRICS, once they form and everything in August, do you think honestly that they're going to be really great trade partners with the US? I mean, think about it. They're not. And so a lot of these companies, and believe it or not, when you really look at the consumer good industry, which is a $600 billion industry, 11 companies control everything that we buy. And so, if you go to my website, I think I've written a couple articles on it. I use a circle and it shows the 11 companies that own everything. And, you can't tell me that, they're not sourcing stuff from either China or they're not sourcing their stuff from BRICS nations. And then again, once the BRIC comes into control, then these countries are not going to be friendly to us anymore. And at least that's my opinion. That's what I'm reading out there with a lot of global economists and global strategists and everything. They are very concerned. They're very concerned that once the 23 nations join BRICS, they're going to use that leverage to basically kind of shove us out. And if we don't have these things secured here in the US, then we're going to be up the paddle without the creek, or up the creek without a paddle. So, but I really encourage you to start looking at, what are you going to do when you can't get your toothpaste? What are you going to do when you don't get your mouthwash? Or what are you going to do when you can't mop your floors or wash your dishes or clean your toilets or wipe your baby's butt or, this, that, or other, So one of the things that we have done is joined up with Patriot Switch. And again, the link is down there. I know some of you have reached out to me and, you filled out my form and I've been trying to contact you. Do me a favor, let me know. I'd love to talk to you, show you what we're doing. And I've been helping a number of families already making that switch over to American made, family owned companies that are, doing the right thing. And the thing I love about this company too, is not woke. So I got a real issue with all this woke junk being shoved down my throat. But putting in place these supply chains now versus waiting till later, again, a really good book that I highly recommend is a book called Who Moved My Cheese? And it really talks about having a complete mind change and being adaptive to change. And again, the book is about $12. Get it. It's about a 45-minute read, but it will help you with the light bulbs going off. And, if you don't start making these changes now, then you will be caught behind the eight ball, like it or not. And you say, no, 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 I'll have no, you won't, because it's not human nature. And so it's a forced thing that you have to do consciously to make these changes. And so it takes time, about 60 to 90 days, for you to fully adapt and overcome these things, that if you do it in an SHTF situation, you're going to be, behind the eight ball, like it or not. And if you're behind the eight ball on a lot of these things, you're going to be out there with the mobs fighting over toilet paper, fighting over shampoo, fighting over whatever else that was made in China or Chinese sourced and stuff. And you're not going to be able to get these things. And so this is why I highly encourage you guys, put your personal supply chains in order now. So, and again, I know I'm preaching and everything, but I'm passionate about this. And I'm really deeply concerned that a lot of people, even preppers, are not really prepared. Because I've gone to a couple conferences, and I was specifically talking to people about a lot of this stuff. And I was asking them, do you have a plan B in place? And like it or not, they said, no, we don't. And these are preppers, folks. I mean, seasoned preppers, and they don't have plan Bs in place. They think they do. They got their food, and they got their solar generators, and they got, their first aid supplies, and, they got all these other stuff. But, when I started talking about day-to-day daily use items, and I started naming off a bunch of stuff and everything, like all of them, about a good 95% of the people that I talked to said they don't. And so, but start really looking into your plan B. And if you don't have a plan B, click on my link below, talk to me, and let's help you get a plan B in place. So, but we're coming up here. We got 54 minutes. So, any questions, any comments, or anything like that? Let's see what we got here. Heather says hi. She said, I had to said watching Thomas, Heather. I don't know, people are making ends meet. Yeah, I totally agree, Heather. People are having a hard time making ends meet. And that's another thing. And I love what we're doing, Patriot Switch. We're saving money. I ran an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm going to put it together and share it. But I have it in a chart right now, but I've got an Excel spreadsheet, and we saved about $92, $97 last month, excuse me, on just the day-to-day items that we use. So we're saving money, we're buying American, and we're buying family owned. So just put Who Moved My Cheese on hold at the library. We're lucky to have a big sister. That's good. Read it. It'll take you 45 minutes to read it. And so but let's see, Feather took a foraging class today. Huge hit with people. She led a foraging class. Good job. And so, but let's see. That's everything I can think of. Anybody, if you have any questions or anything, please comment below. Let me know. And then, hit up my Patriot Switch link. Or if you got questions, email me, ray@raymondmoore.com, ray@raymondmoore.com. And be glad to help you with any questions, anything like that. I live on Facebook too. So friend me, hush up. Friend me, and I will be glad to sit here and converse with you on private messenger and things. So I'm here to help. I'm wanting to help folks. But if you don't start moving here soon, then things are going to happen at warp speed, and you're going to be left behind. And I don't want that to happen. And so me and Cynthia are here to help, and you can talk to her too. I mean, the things that we're doing is going to really help our families, and that's what we want to do, is help yours. So, but Heather says both my dogs are barking now too. I don't know what's happening up there. I'm hearing some footsteps. It might be Sarah or something like that. They're wanting out or something. But anyways, that's everything. And so I really just appreciate you coming in here. I appreciate all our wonderful community joining us every weekend and everything. And then also, how did you like my video of my electroculture? Did you check that out? And are you guys doing electroculture? I would really love to hear if you guys are experimenting with it, and what have you seen? Have you seen any, changes? You've seen some good things and bad things, or nothing, or whatever. But I've got a couple stakes in the ground now with copper wire and wrapped around and everything. Just again, go watch that video that I just posted yesterday. And that was just a spur of the moment video, and just showing you what we're doing in our garden. But I wanted to give electroculture a try, and the copper was only $20, $21, $22 for a 50-foot roll. And so not, no biggie. And so good enough for an experiment and so forth. So, but that's all. We'll see you. Raymond Moore, Kilted Prepper. Goodbye, God bless, and kilt on.